It feels like it's been a while. I feel like we haven't really talked much, and there's been kind of a lot going on in my life, which is part of the reason why I haven't sat down and made a proper talk to you video. And I don't want to be melodramatic about anything. This isn't one of those, oh, I'm quitting YouTube, or oh, I've gone away for a long time, but I'm coming back. I'm still making weekly videos. That is still a thing that happens. My life is just a little bit different than it has been for various reasons and in various ways. I feel like this is one of those situations where I want to ask you, oh, do you want the good news first or the bad news first? But that's not really how videos work. So I guess I'll start with the more negative stuff and then we can end on a good note. Starting off with relatively smaller stuff, I almost got a job in my field working for a certain company that makes post-it notes. Just didn't work out. Interviewed, spent a lot of time and energy, and then they went with an internal candidate. So there was nothing I could have done about it. It's not that I wasn't qualified or that they didn't like me. Just didn't work out. Potentially I could have been doing cool stuff like monitoring an incinerator for pollutants and working on air quality stuff, which is exciting to me because I'm a nerd like that and it's what I studied, and I would really like to do that as a job versus what I'm doing right now, which is just sitting at a desk all day, not doing anything relevant to science. And I've been rejected from jobs before. This is nothing new. I've gotten so many rejection letters or just no response whatsoever, and I get over it. It's fine. I let myself get excited about this one because I thought it might actually happen, but oh well. Just continuing to work multiple jobs and hoping that I can actually start my career sometime. That would be nice. Luckily, there are more good things than bad things, but the next bad thing is kind of a big one, and it's that my grandmother passed away yesterday morning. She was my dad's mom, and she lived on a farm that I've been to many, many times. I never saw it when it had animals or anything, but spent a lot of time there growing up. I was kind of a farm kid that way. A lot of summers, a lot of weekends, did a lot of work there, and I learned a lot from her. She was an incredible woman. She taught me how to make pies and caramel rolls and kolaches, because we're Czechoslovakian, how to do farm work and garden. And sew, too. She had a treadle machine, so you rock your foot back and forth to make it go. And that was how I learned to sew. Her husband died before my parents got married, so I never knew him, and I didn't really ever hear much about him. The stuff I do know about him I pieced together from a lot of different sources, and even now I don't really have a good idea of what kind of a man he was, but apparently my dad's a lot like him, so that's interesting. My grandma came to my high school graduation party. She lives about 6 hours away north of us, northern Minnesota, and she came down for my graduation, which is a big deal because she didn't travel a lot. She broke her hip while she was here and didn't really tell anyone because she was a very strong woman. She always took care of herself. She lived alone on that farm for years as an older woman, and she was good at taking care of herself. But so she fell and broke her hip, and they drove her back up there pretty much like lots of hours before she actually went to a hospital. She was just older at that point, and breaking a hip is a big deal, and she spent some time recovering from it, and then when it had healed, she had been away from her farm long enough that it didn't really make sense for her to live there alone anymore. I mean, at that point, she was old enough that it had been several years since it had really been safe for her to be alone up there, but she was very insistent that she didn't want to leave, so she stayed until she couldn't. And then since my high school graduation, she lived in assisted living spaces and made friends, and then the people around her died, as they do in those places, and she got worse mentally and physically. She got smaller, and she didn't have the same group and routine that she had. She wasn't able to go to her church anymore, and that was a huge part of her life. And her hearing had been going for some years, but as the years went on, she had trouble remembering who people were. You would talk to her, and it had to be just the right level, or she couldn't understand what you were saying. Even then, it was, who knows. And for the past at least a year, I guess, she just got real bad. And frankly, her speech and her movement, like, she used a wheelchair for the last good amount of her life and couldn't really move her hands anymore, a lot of shaking, couldn't really grip things. And when her speech got so bad, at one point when we visited her, it seemed as though she had had a stroke or something, but no one else said anything. She has 7 children, 2 sons and 5 daughters, and several of those daughters are nurses, and they didn't say anything, and the people who were supposed to be looking after her didn't say anything, so we were like, okay, I guess she's just, must be her medication or something, and it didn't get better from there. And eventually, recently, very, very recently, within the past month, they were like, oh, it seems like she may have been having like a series of small strokes. And we were like, yep, that makes sense. It's really, really sad, but it makes sense. She got to the point where she just wasn't eating. She had been dependent on other people to feed her, and that's what we were paying them to do, and they didn't really do it. They would, like, give her a mouthful of food, and then it didn't work out, and then that's what she had to have for the day. I'm quite frankly disgusted when I think of the level of care that older people receive in facilities like that. Like, they pay so much. They pay everything they have sometimes, and then they're just so alone and ill-treated and just... Anyway, they decided to call in hospice last weekend, which is basically what you do when someone just isn't going to make it. Someone's really close to death. And her body wasn't failing her, really. And when they started properly feeding her, she seemed like she might get better. So, yesterday morning, my mom told me that she had passed away. And I didn't feel anything at first. Anything negative. I felt relief, and I felt happy for her that she didn't have to be in the position that she was, that she didn't have to be old and alone a lot of the time. One of the times that I went to visit her, we stayed for as long as we could, and then we wheeled her back to her table where her friends were, and she was like, no, you can't leave me, I don't want to be alone. And it just broke my heart. And I don't want to see anyone like that. So I'm glad that she doesn't have to deal with that anymore. So at first, yeah, I didn't feel anything negative, and I was at work, so I was just focusing on doing my job, and I got through the day, and I didn't tell anyone there because I'm not really close with them. It's just a temp job. And I went home and I said it out loud that she was dead, and it just kind of hit me. I don't even really know what I'm feeling right now because it's still so soon. I'm definitely still processing, and I'll be forced to do a lot of processing over the next 2 days because I'm basically required to be with my extended family. Like, even if that's not the best thing for me, I'm just required to be there. And I'll do it for my dad, of course, but his family, it's not a fun, healthy situation there. So I didn't think I was going to talk about that as in-depth as I did. That's the reality of things. It's life. And death is a part of that, and it's important to recognize that, I think. So there you go. That's the bad news. Let's move on to good things, because there have been a lot of good things in my life as well. I went to Pride for the first time in my entire life, and that was great. And I loved seeing all of the queer people out and about, just existing and interacting, and it felt so safe and accepting and good. There's definitely something to be said for the fact that Pride started with a riot, but I think it's also important to have a space to be proud and to accept who you are and celebrate. Just 2 weeks ago, I went to my first ever Chicago convention, which was amazing and so much bigger than the ones I'm used to. It was so cool. I'm so glad I joined the Maid Cafe. There are just such good people. Like, there's so many people of color, there's so many queer people. Everyone's just so accepting and good. And also I just really love the experience. I love being a butler, I love the dancing, I love the atmosphere. It was also really nice to see Chicago again, because I hadn't gone back since I graduated, and it felt like home more than my house does that I'm in right now, and more than Minneapolis or St. Paul does. So I don't know what that means. I wouldn't want to live in Chicago, but it does feel like familiar and good to be there. Speaking of conventions, it has been almost 1 year since I went to my first convention and my first Maid Cafe, where I met my new partner. So that's a thing. I am Polly, in case you didn't know that, and Mari is my partner, of course. She has been for years and years and years, and now I have another one, and he's very good and a huge nerd. I don't know how much I'm going to talk about him on this channel, because I just haven't talked to him about those boundaries yet, and I think it's important to communicate that. I will tell you that I like him a lot, and he's been the inspiration for quite a few of my videos. In case you couldn't tell by how much I'm smiling, he makes me very happy, and I'm real gay. So, also good things. He got me into this TV show called Dirk Gently, and I absolutely love it. I am not quite finished with it yet, so please don't spoil the ending. But yes, if I have any Dirk Gently fans following me, please talk to me about it, because I love it. I identify with Dirk so much, and I'm pretty sure I will even more before the series is over. I'm pretty sure this video is already going to be much longer than I intended for it to be, so I'm just gonna end it there. I hope I didn't bum anyone out too much, but it's life, and it happens. I'm okay. I will be okay. It's just reality, which is something you don't often get on YouTube necessarily. So this is the end screen, and here is a video that is recommended just for you. Like, it was specially picked by the YouTube algorithm for you to watch. If you aren't already subscribed, you can click down there. I make weekly content, so there'll be more of me, but just one of me. More of me would be too much. I'll see you next week.